Okay, what are we doing here, hun?
We're going to have a little video about sourdough. I know that normally we do gardening videos, but I was going to try to do some more cooking videos. We do a lot of cooking with our gardening stuff. But one of the things that I do is I have a little sourdough. So this is Sarah, the sourdough. If you are at all familiar with sourdough, you know you have to name your sourdough, and mine's name is Sarah. So today what I'm just going to show you is how I feed and store Sarah and the equipment that I use. I have this awesome spoon that my friend Susan bought for me. And then I have these, they are made by Tupperware. I have no idea how you would get a hold of them because they're probably 15 years old. But the thing that I like about them is they are square, so they fit nicely into the refrigerator. And the lids have this little, so you can pop off the top and then the air from the sourdough can escape. So that's why I like them. So I keep my sourdough in the refrigerator. She only gets fed every 2 weeks if I'm on my game, but she can go 3 and probably could do 4. Susan next door has some of Sarah, hers is Elizabeth, and she goes weeks without feeding hers, and she has a slightly different process than I do. But basically what I do is I feed Sarah, put her in the fridge, and then in 2 weeks I come back and I feed her again, and I use some of the discard to make something. That's all I do. I don't make sourdough bread. I don't feed it every day. I don't leave it on the counter. This works really well for me because it is easy and fast, so I don't have to do a lot of work. But if you know anything about sourdough and you know what happens when you keep it in the fridge, Sarah's been in there for 3 weeks because I didn't get to her last weekend. We were away. So let's just take a look at what Sarah looks like. Oh yeah, that's not appetizing. My first tip is if you're going to do a refrigerator sourdough discard, don't panic when this happens. It's totally fine. Watch. A little mixing, and Sarah is now the perfect discard consistency. She doesn't smell bad. She smells like yeast. And now that I've mixed her up, she almost has no smell, actually. Little tip for you, if you like something that tastes really sourdoughy, you use the more recently fed discard or sourdough. And if you like it less sourdoughy, you let it get older like this, and there's just less of that sourdoughy taste. So there you go. Okay, so she's mixed up. Next steps. Normally, I just make flatbreads. So I get my flatbread recipe out and I figure out how much discard I'm going to use. I'll definitely share that recipe in another video, but what I'm doing right now, and this is probably one of the most critical steps if you're doing sourdough, is to put aside what you need to feed. So you separate them so that you don't use all of this in your recipe and then realize that now you don't have any sourdough because you've used it in a recipe. It almost happened to me once, and I know that other people have done it. So I'm going to put aside what I need for my sourdough recipe. And this is really the only thing I do with the sourdough most of the time. I have other recipes that I use too, but since I use this one so much, I've got a pretty good system down. So I need 360 grams, but that looks like I'm taking a lot out. So Now I'm worried I don't have enough. So I'm gonna put some of this back in. It's all a little practice, you know, like this isn't perfect. Okay, don't weigh your spoon when you're weighing. Okay. Okay. I have 240 grams of the sourdough, which is enough to make a normal recipe. So I'm just going to put this to the side. Take my new bucket, zero out, and I want to weigh and see how much of this I have. Okay, I've got about 270 of the discard. Yeah, easy. I zero it out. I add 270 grams of water. Water goes in first. That's because I mix it up just with the water and the sourdough. If you're a little off, you have a couple extra grams, it's not like a big deal. A lot of times I will add a little extra water because I feel like sometimes she gets a little too thick. But as long as the amount of water that you're adding is basically the same as the flour that you're going to add, you're good to go. Okay, so I just gave that a little stir. That's what it looks like. Okay. We're going to zero that out again and add 270 grams of flour. I use all-purpose unbleached flour. You can use bread flour, that works fine. Some people like to switch over to a whole wheat or a rye, and that's possible, but if you're starting out with something that's made with all-purpose flour, I would recommend that you do it gradually. You know, do like maybe 3/4 of the all-purpose flour to 1/4 of the rye or whole wheat, and just next week then, or the next feeding, half and half, and then the next feeding 3/4 and 1/4, so that you gradually move it over, because we are talking about living things, and if you change their diet, they won't really like it. So you don't want to be too drastic in what you do with the flour changing over. And it would be easier to move from white to whole wheat than it would be to move from whole wheat to white. So if you're not 100%, maybe just keep 2 sourdoughs, one with whole wheat and then one with the all-purpose white flour until you decide what you want, or you can just run 2. Susan next door has 2 that she runs, and they're both white as far as I know, but her method is slightly different than mine. After she mixes her, after she does her feeding, she leaves it on the counter and lets it get all bubbly for quite a few hours before she puts it in the fridge. So, but she's retired. I think she cooks more than me, so I think she uses it more than me. Okay, our sourdough has been fed, and this is what it looks like. Now, it does have some kind of lumps in it. That's totally normal. I've never mixed it up and not had lumps. So basically, she's ready to go back into the fridge for the next 2 weeks and just sit there and think about herself. And so, yeah, it's as easy as that. Maintaining Sarah is super easy. And on the next video, I will show you what I do with the discard that I've put to the side. Thanks for watching.